And now please welcome. Our next speaker is Ilya Hanykov, who is, well, he's a startup, he's an investor, he's a co-founder of Aerotransport project, and he will speak about a very complex combination of things. Essentially, I first was looking for somebody who can talk about blockchain. But as we discussed blockchain, he also started discussing his project. And then a few other issues like ecosystem. And I thought that this is a great opportunity for us to actually have many things rolled in one. So here, Ilya.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's a huge honor. And since innovation is a path from point A to point B where you don't know where the point B is, let's just check. Without knowing where it leads, let's check how prone you are to innovation. Innovation is doing without knowing, making mistakes. So, without knowing, would you care to stand up right now from your chairs? May I ask you to stand up? Just observe how you feel when you do this. You don't know where it leads. May I ask you to just jump? Just once. Be careful, it's just packed. Another one. Yeah, we will be talking about flying cars. So now you've experienced the flight. You will be knowing what we are talking to. Another thing, please. Let's just jump. Good. Sit down. Thank you. You helped me to overcome my fear of public speaking, but also you have made yourself healthier. Because what happened is that when we jump, do it in the morning. When we jump, neurophysiology creates a hormonal impact on your body of growth hormones. So now we all are a little bit cured. That's the cure, and that's also a little bit of a pain killing and endorphins, and we're a little bit happier now. So without further ado, I will also do a little bit of innovation because I want to see the slides. I don't remember my presentation. I'm sorry. So I will do like this, and now we go. So that's the clicker. So we'll be talking about innovation, we'll be talking about the future, and one of the ideas about when we talk about the future is trying to embrace the vision. Where does it lead to? And what once was the future is actually now past. So the Christmas Carol tells us to embrace the spirit of the past. And while in our country that was the spirit of the past, in France, let's see, in France, Jean-Marc Cocteau was asked in the end of the 19th century to picture how France would be in 100 years' time. And there are a couple of pictures, and I want to test you first, or rather bug you with these pictures without even properly introducing myself, which I will do a little bit later. What do you see here? Does anybody recognize what this is? Do we have it already now?
Roomba.
We have it. Yes, certainly. Now, what is this? Skype. That's definitely Skype. But just remember this picture, because the question I will ask in the end will be, what's wrong with this picture? So, yeah, definitely, it's Skype. Or video. What is this?
Ghostbusters.
Isn't it, huh? It is the microscope. Yeah, it is. So, it is the microscope, but it is the bacteria. Look at these things. They are scary. They scare shit. And the projector was scared. This is how it actually looks. For me, it looks actually even scary. So, let's see another slide. Now, this one will be difficult. Does anybody care to give it a try? Molecular kitchen. Okay. Any more precise ideas? I'll give you the idea. That's how it looks now. Come on. That's how it looks now. Any ideas? they are growing burgers. These are the meat for burgers. You have to grow in a laboratory. So basically, that's the flying cars, that's the flying postman, and of course we already have it now, and it looks like this. It's not our design though, but basically the question I wanted to ask, what is wrong with the pictures? So who would care to answer? Good. So technology, they thought, would require people to operate it. Good one. I actually never thought about this. Thank you. Huh? Again? That's it. Actually, that's what I wanted to elaborate on. But thanks for that one. Anyone?
Technologies depicted are uncomfortable. They are big, messy.
Uncomfortable, big and messy. Good. Thank you for helping me during this lecture. I wanted to say that we notice big things. We have an idea of what we want. We notice big things that are happening now, like the cinema, like the audio, this old style, what is called in English, gramophone, I guess it's still. And we think of combining these big things, and we think that's the future. The truth is that we have to observe small things, because a lot of things will change. The smallest of things. You wouldn't need wires for Skype, so no wires. You wouldn't need projectors, because maybe it will be backlit. All the smallest of things, the materials, the shapes, the everything is prone to change. So when we are picturing the future, I remember there was one comment here that somebody wanted to make all mistakes during doing their research project, and then not do mistakes in their startups. Forget it. Startup is a process of doing mistake after mistake after mistake, because you never know the future. You can't. Future is the intersection of thousands of trends. So with this pinch of salt, consider what I will be telling you also. What I will be telling you is not a huge 100 years from now, but it's maybe 1 year or 2 years from now. And it's happening already now. It's in the building, so we can plan it, not envision it. But by the time you retire, it will be which year? 2050. Would you even know what the world will be like in that year? So my name is Ilya Hanykov, and I like to say that my personal data is carefully recorded and stored on a website prohibited on the territory of the Russian Federation called LinkedIn. And I have a long story of being a fintech executive, then doing my own business, selling it to a large multinational, then completely switching the field, went to do internet startups, did it for 4 years. Out of 12 ideas, 10 were complete mistakes, so we spent money and effort on that. We sold 2, more or less a modest exits that you can imagine, but still some success there. And now I'm a co-founder of a project called Bartini, and as you may notice from it's Lamborghini, as people say Ferrari, and this is Bartini. Bartini is named after a talented aerodynamic engineer of the beginning of the 20th century who fled from Mussolini to Soviet Union. So he wanted freedom, in those days. So, and we're building flying cars, we want freedom as well, who doesn't? So, he fled to Soviet Union, and he actually designed a lot of things in aerodynamics. He was a big teacher of Korolev, Ilyushin, Tupolev. He actually, when you fly Boeing and you observe those wings are calculated according to different equations that Roberto Bartini has designed, if you like, or discovered. He did for aerodynamics what Tesla did for electromagnetism, so we named the company after him. And if I may also, Maxim Kiselyov, one of your professors, is another co-founder of this project. And and the project is about this car. Nikolai, we will be talking about community and innovation, which is not happening without community. Nikolai is a leader of and founder of Creative Russia, a community of more than 5,000 designers, makers, urbanists. So I took the courage of inviting him, dragging him here. I hope he will help us to have a more fruitful discussion around this in the Q&A session. So we're building this car. Just to give you an idea how we sort of where to insert the blockchain, I wanted to show you this picture. So this is a vertical takeoff and landing. Right now it's in cruise mode, so you can see that the engines are in vertical position right now. So this is the hover mode. So you can see that the engines are tilting, tilt shift engines, and this is how it will land, and this is how it will look on your conventional parking lot. It's the size of the conventional business sedan, and it has 8 engines in 4 engine groups. It has chairs that will rotate so that you can easily sort of sit and then rotate into the space inside. We're the only Russian company that talks to Uber, and Uber wants to deploy a network or networks of flying taxi systems in Dallas, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi in 2020. But even before then, if you come to Dubai in 2019, you will most likely experience flying taxi by another sort of car maker or aerial vehicle maker, or VTOLs as we call them, vertical takeoff and landing. So I will be using this VTOL just for simplicity. So another VTOL maker called Volocopter, which has been making it for the last 5 years. It's a helicopter with 18 small rotors on top of it. And the prince or sheikh of Dubai is already purchasing them to start the system. So, and in 2020, if you go to Dallas, you will just pop up your mobile app, you will choose Uber Elevate or Uber Air, it will come and pick you up, and hopefully it will be one of our cars as well. So, it's purely electric. It flies on one battery charge for 30 minutes, which is enough to do, on average, 2 hops within the city limits, or to go as far as 150 kilometers per one charge. I have the technical specifications here, and the interesting thing is that, again, innovation and risks and everything. This is the technology that is already available, so we're not inventing anything. We're taking off-the-shelf things. The 15 aerospace engineers with more than 10 years experience in constructing, assembling, test flying, and certifying the big passenger jets, they are making this happen of the technologies that are already available, the batteries, the hulk, the materials. But we are betting very hardly, and that's really the hope, the vision of it, is the hydrogen fuel cells. You see the small script. Sometimes it's important to look at the small script. With hydrogen fuel cells, it's an amazing technology. It allows to actually pack much more energy into the battery. It's no longer a battery though. It's I hear you. Just a second. Hydrogen is a way to conserve electricity, if you like. So if you take electricity, you put sort of 2 electrodes in the water, and then you have oxygen and hydrogen, as you may know, and you can sell oxygen or just breathe oxygen for the fun of it, and then take the hydrogen and put it in your car. And this hydrogen is then electricity in a form which you can transport. And around that will be a huge new world, as we think. This technology is expensive now, but you already now we have Toyota Mirais, for example, are already on sale and have been for the past 1.5 years. And Toyota Mirais, there is a line, if you want to buy a Toyota Mirai, you will get one in 5 years. They're selling in the US, in California, in Japan, in Germany, in London. Hydrogen is very safe. In center of London, there is a hydrogen refuel station. No methane, no gas, no liquefied gas. So what happens is that this technology, the bet we're making is that this technology will be more and more affordable. And it allows 5 times more range. So per one fuel of hydrogen, you will get to St. Petersburg, which is in less than 2 hours, or maybe 3 hours. So imagine the change this will bring to our lives, and imagine this being available in less than 3 years from now. So I had a question, but I would rather, actually I'll take this one, but I would rather you sort of archive your questions till the end of the lecture, otherwise I can't manage my time. Yeah, sure. Nothing is complete, that's for sure. I mean, we have, there are 15 companies in the world that are talking to Uber, and we're building something for them to choose from in 2020 to use in their system. And all of the companies are more or less at the stage of prototyping as we speak. EHang, the Chinese company, they had a flying drone, and that's an oversized drone that has the hover mode only. We have the cruise mode. This tilt shift actually allows a lot of energy savings because the body is the carrying wing itself. And when you tilt shift the engines, you can go horizontally at much higher speeds than compared to if you only have your engines horizontally. And this speed allows, basically at speeds faster than 100 kilometers per hour, the carrying force of the body itself, which is a wing, basically compensates the gravity. So you only have to drag it, and you don't have to lift anymore. And that gives, let's see if I have a laser beam here. Very good. That exactly gives per 1 minute of hover, we spend 5 kilowatt hours energy. Per 1 minute of cruise, we spend only 1.5. And this is basically the challenge, and we have demonstrated on our models that we can tilt shift and we don't fall. That's the main thing, because you have to control different thrusts, different vectors of power. When you tilt shift, you suddenly lose a lot of supporting. How you call it? Oh my God! Early Alzheimer's. Thank you. You suddenly lose a lot of lift, so you have to adjust the motors. You have to have the flight controllers that are capable of that. So that's a challenge. So we have demonstrated we can do this. We demonstrated on different models that it does fly, and the energy consumption is dramatically reduced, and the speed dramatically increases, and we are scaling it up as we talk right now, as everybody else at the moment. With this type of design, nobody's yet shown the full functional, ready-made commercial product. It's not in the world yet. But let's see. Let's go on. Now that's Martini. Why do we need blockchain? Suddenly, switch of topics. So, has anybody heard of it? By show of hands, everybody, I think, it's been in the news a lot. So, would anyone think that blockchain for flying cars is a reasonable thing to do? Okay, let me convince you otherwise. Good. We could go into technical details of what is blockchain under the hood of it. But let's look at it from the user perspective. And from the user perspective, a 10-year-old can download an app and have a financial account in less than 5 seconds. By the time he grows up, he goes to a bank, asks for a bank account, and the bank clerk says, okay, you come back in 3 working days, we'll have the account set up for you. And he says, what are you talking about? I already have the financial account where I could transact with anybody in monetary terms or in terms of value, transferring value between us for different goods and services. Why do I need a bank account at all? The banks have realized that, and most of the banks are now looking very closely at blockchain. And they're trying to understand how to survive, not how to use blockchain, but they are trying to understand how to survive when frankly speaking, they are not required anymore. Because what blockchain does, it is essentially a non-breakable, non-corruptible database of a growing, constantly growing database of transactions, which is maintained by many people, by community, and that's why communities are so important. Maintained by many people, and that's why it's unbreakable, because there is no one central server to break into. You have to break into millions of computers. And it's a constantly growing database of records. You may have heard the term distributed ledger, but let's not go into the terms, let's look at the substance of things. And all these records are actually transactions. So you can think that blockchain is a growing database of records about people, or rather wallets, transacting between themselves. And they transact, so one is sending, the other is receiving, and what they're sending is a piece of code. And that piece of code is, in Bitcoin blockchain, for example, it's coin. And then this piece of code is a small piece of code that relates to, for example, to transfer of value. Just purely that, and only that. It's just transfer of value. But it could also be transfer of data. For example, it could be the transfer of your ownership right for a car, and that's what Volvo is currently doing. So in future, when you go and buy a Volvo car, you will not have keys. You will not have registration documents. You will prove your right of ownership because there is a record in some database which is not even located anywhere except of your own computers that are connected to this peer-to-peer network. So everybody remembers P2P, everyone knows torrents, I would assume, and you may look at blockchain as a huge torrent network where there is only one torrent, which is the blockchain. And then each block, why is it called blockchain? It's chain of blocks, and every block is a set of records. It's just A transacted Z to B, and so on and so forth. That's just a ledger of records. And then in one block, you can say that in Bitcoin, one block appears every 5 to 6, 7 minutes. And then in this block, there is a number of transactions, and that block is signed, it's verified, it's in the system, and it's there forever. Nobody can alter this record because there is no way, actually, to alter that record, and it's always there unless all the millions of computers go bust. So, so this transaction, when it is signed, when the block is signed, that's very important, there is a consensus mechanism. Remember those words, consensus or consensus protocol. Now, you may have heard the words proof of work, proof of stake, proof of something. And those are different consensus protocols or consensus mechanisms that are used so that all the millions of people that are part of the network agree that this is the correct record to put into the system. And this complicated number of words just means that if you are an eligible part of the network, you have your cryptographic keys to represent yourself. And that's the only way. You don't represent yourself by name or passport number or registration in Moscow City. You present yourself with your private key. And your private key stays private. It's with you. It's always with you. You record it even on paper. And there is your public key. And your public key is sometimes it is just your wallet number. Everybody sees your public key, but doesn't know that it is you. Whenever you present your private key to the system knows, and you say, okay, I transact this amount of bitcoins to that wallet, and this is my private key to sign this transaction. So the system identifies you, the credentials are valid, and then the block, it's recorded in the block, and the cryptographic key has to be found to sign this block. And who finds this? And there's a lot of computational power that has to be put into solving this mathematical puzzle. And by owning this power, you basically make the network secure. By requiring to have that much computing power. So when all the miners, and they're called miners, they're not called miners because they mine bitcoins. They're actually contributing, that's another word to remember. In this consensus mechanism, people contribute their computing power to maintain the network so that they demonstrate work they are doing with their computational power. And by that work, they vote. And by that voting, in a consensus mechanism, they validate that this set of transactions is actually correct. The hash of those transactions has been found if you Google it. And then they sign this block that contains all those transactions. The important things to remember here is that without community, Bitcoin is not possible. It's secure because there is a community, and a lot of work has to be done in order to have that thing secured. There is another consensus mechanism. Now, people are criticizing Bitcoin that the amount of energy that is used to maintain Bitcoin right now equals to all the consumption of energy by Ireland. So that's a waste of resource, and people say that's a waste of resource. And we're living in a world where we don't want to waste resources. We collect plastics, we collect paper. And the thing is that there are other consensus mechanisms that make other networks. There are other blockchains. One, for example, is proof of stake. So you vote by the amount of tokens you have on your wallet. So the more wallet you have, the more invested you are in the system, the more voting power you have to validate that the transactions are correct, and you are motivated to act that transactions are correct, because then you get the reward on top of your wallet holdings. Now, this may seem complicated, but from a user perspective, you are rewarded for maintaining blockchain. That's the huge change in, I would say this is the technology that is introducing huge change to society, because you can have direct, measurable, honest, verifiable reward for contributing your computing power, financial holdings, maybe physical work that you do, and get reward automatically according to the rules set by the system. So there is no third party to decide how to remunerate you. So the third party is removed in a transaction between two free men or women. And when the third party is removed, with that third party removed are managers' salaries, inefficiencies, transaction costs, but also removed are the, if you like, capitalistic appreciation, those dividends that the shareholders of the organization want to have for the fact that they are managing, they sort of took the risks of funding this organization and its development. So a lot of things are removed. And just to give you an idea of how large those things to be removed can be, the market for flying cars is $100 billion. It's a lot, $100 billion. That's the, right now there are 20 companies, so we can think that we're pretty well off if we, or when we deliver those cars. But the market for flights, the amount of money that you will pay for your flights totals to $1 trillion. So the cars, 100 billion, the flights, $1 trillion. Now you ask yourself, where does the 900 billion go? Okay, it's the parking lots, I buy that. It's the certification, I buy that. It's also the energy that will be used. Okay, the energy will most likely come from solar powers, solar panels, there is some depreciation on that, okay, I take that. But 900 billion, really? This 900 billion will be taken by either centralized organizations that control the order taxi button, or there will be no 900 billion. There will be much less, because the infrastructure will be developed by guys like you, by contributing and getting reward, and like blockchain for Bitcoin, if a corporation would want to develop the computing power consuming energy equal to the size of to the country size of Ireland, imagine how much the corporation would charge, or how much it will have to invest to build such an infrastructure. Yet it appeared without any corporation, just by efforts of the community, which was united by one idea: let's tokenize money. Tokenization gives people the idea of owning part of the system, and gives the not even the idea, but actually gives them part of the system into their wallets and being rewarded for it. So Ethereum, for example, Ethereum tokenized computing power. So while Bitcoin blockchain is for tokenization of cash, of coins, of units of value, just for that, just to be able to exchange units of value. There are other blockchains for other use. So Ethereum tokenized computational power of the machine executing a code. So whenever you want to execute a code, you can put it onto Ethereum and pay different people who contributed their computing power to execute your code. And there are commissions, everything is supply and demand based, so everything is very fair. You pay according to the load. If the load on the system is low, your code will be executed faster and cheaper compared to when the load on the system is high. Your code, same code, will be executed at a slightly higher fee. So what happens is that this gives, and combined, and remember those pictures, let's combine the trend. You have something to transact value with, and you have the code that can be executed. What does it give us? You have probably heard the term smart contracts. So you can actually make the system smarter than just allowing you to transact between each other in financial elements, units. You can make the system smarter, and you can actually do, which are the banks? You can give instructions. So I pledge these tokens to be given to that guy if that guy delivers per that email certain thing that I need. And the code will automatically change. Well, I'm a little bit generalizing here, it's a little bit more complicated, but the code will check the email, see that the thing is there, and disperse the funds. We don't need a bank clerk, highly paid, MBA, MSc in finance, 30 years of training to do that for us anymore. So, what next? What next is this idea of being rewarded for contributing your things into the system. What happens with those things? Now, who has heard the term Internet of Things? We have all these sensors, we have things that are working for us. So, somebody has bought this Epson projector, and it works for us. Maybe it doesn't now. What is the use of this projector? Okay, somebody might say, well, $1,000 was paid for it, so its value is $1,000. But the value, consider it, the value is only there when you're using it. Why have you paid the $1,000? Now, who paid? Why did you do it? No, the guy is probably not here. The thing is that in the modern world, let's put another trend in the picture. Now, we have Uber. And Uber is the idea of being able to travel without owning a car. No longer you need, okay, the taxis were there a long time ago, but never was it so that I press a button, no barriers to entry, in 3 minutes the car is here. Okay, take ride sharing, let's put one much further. Belka cars, all this Delimobil, etc. All these things. You don't need to own a car to own your ride. You don't need the car to own the function of the ride. You don't need to own, actually it's actually also much cheaper because you utilize the resources much more intensely. Consider this projector here. If you buy a car, you only drive it 5% of times. 5% of time, average. A taxi driver in Uber utilizes the car on average somewhere like 25% of time. So it's 5 times better utilization. If everybody, and it's also, that's why it's cheaper for us. The total cost of ownership per kilometer of ride with owned car is on average, depending on the car you have, but it's at least twice more expensive than driving with Uber. Why would you ever want to buy a car? Why? Well, you can say it's my personal space, I put my stuff in it, it's just there, I use it as storage near my house. So be it, another function. But for a ride, you don't need to own a car anymore. You don't need to own a flat to have a shelter. There is Airbnb. All this technology allows us to sort of access the function with one click. To own this function in one click. To own this, you own. If you have a wallet on Bitcoin, you're already part of the huge international financial system. You can pay anywhere in the world. You can go. I'm not advocating for Bitcoin in particular, but I mean the functionality is there. You can't even get this functionality easily without blockchain and Bitcoin. Now consider back to the Internet of Things. So if you can have this function at the tap of the button, why do you need to own things? You need to own, then ask yourself, what is it that you have to own? To have access to this function. Okay, in Uber you download an app, you connect your credit card to it to be able to use Uber. But with this Internet of Things, if you start paying for only the useful function of the device, then we will have fewer devices, better utilized, cheaper, available for every one of us. So the function of ride has already been reduced at least 3 times by the ride-sharing networks. The availability of shelter, of living, will be disrupted. I mean, it's being disrupted right now. It's the costs of living are reducing dramatically because of the people being able to share their flats when they're not used. So there's actually much more living space available already now for us. There is no deficit. So, and now the Internet of Things comes with all the sensors, with all the computing power. You can really reward devices for serving us. Okay, robotics will come, and this idea will take even a huger, better, and more precise loop. But consider that you could pay for a cup of coffee depending on the load of this coffee shop, depending on how much it costed to produce the cup, particular cup that you're using, depending on where the coffee came from. And all that is recorded, and there is a supply and demand in every bit of the system, in every bit of the value chain of delivering a function to you. It's more efficient because you only pay for the function, you don't pay for the transactional cost, and then the function is cheaper, it's more affordable, and it's fairer. And actually, imagine that you can contribute your cups to the coffee shop and get rewarded when you don't use your cups at home. They're just there. You contribute them to the coffee shop, and you get rewarded when other people drink from your cups. I mean, it sounds a little futuristic, but I'm just giving you a metaphor. Maybe it will not work with cups, but it will work with flying cars. Because what happens is that if you have a loan, or if you have a roof on your house, you can contribute it to the system and get rewarded by other people landing on it. If you have a car, already now there are centralized ride-sharing networks where you can contribute your car and get rewarded. But imagine where there are no transaction costs, there is no central party that takes a little bit of a reward for them. There are more efficiencies because there are no managers to pay salaries to. Everything is based on smart contracts. So what happens is that you don't need to, you basically get compensated for the stuff you're not using and you're contributing onto the network. But that's also how the infrastructure will be built faster. How much effort will it take from one, even huge company, to build infrastructure in the thousands of cities? It will take a long time. But if, well, like with Bitcoin, if everyone contributes their graphic cards, if everyone contributes their processing power, because they know they will get rewarded, it will just happen much faster and much cheaper. And it creates a community effort, it creates entrepreneurship, it creates a lot of reward, a lot of sort of recurring rewards in the economic system. And all that happens because of the idea of tokenization. And that will be the last idea I will discuss before jumping into questions. So, because of tokenization. Now, what does it mean? In financial industry, it's been known, the concept has been known for decades, and it was called securitization. And securitization literally meant that I could share the ownership of this mobile phone with infinite number of people if I sort of issue a note, and some notes were even exchange traded, but if I issue a note saying that I owe you 1/10 of that mobile phone, but I don't owe you 1/10 of physical phone, because if I cut it in pieces it will lose its value, but I owe you 1/10 of its value. So if I sell it, you will get 1/10. And I, for example, sell 10 notes like this, which is a fair thing to do. And then this, you got a security. You got a security in terms of financial security, not the cyber security type of word, but you have this paper, this asset. You can record it on your accounting balance sheet that you have access, or you have exposure to 1/10 of a value of a certain asset, and a number of assets were securitized. Gold, shares, exchange indices, real estate, securitized, and everyone got a little bit of share a little bit of exposure to the value of that underlying asset. So when Bitcoin came, when blockchain came about, when tokenization came, for the financial industry, it was very easy to absorb the idea that you can actually tokenize instead of securitize, and then you don't need to pay Ernst & Young their huge fees. You don't have to pay the investment bankers. You don't have to pay the exchange to get your note listed, because it just happens like this by clicking several buttons and writing some code. You can distribute tokens around, and by owning the token on the wallet, you have a part of that something. Usually, the first projects on blockchain developed in fintech were tokenization of assets. But the thing is, like I told you, you don't need to own the asset anymore, right? Because we don't need those. We don't need gold to own something that will make us rich and be capable of paying monies for things we need. Or we don't need to own gold to have the function of preserving your huge capital that you earn for selling your startup. You don't need flat to have a function of a shelter. So the next thing is tokenizing the function. So there is a huge, now coming to Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is ultimately a huge number of bits and pieces of devices interconnected that serve in synchrony to deliver some useful function. That function is needed, and that function can be tokenized. And if the value, just consider the concept, if the value of that function is expressed in tokens, and all the value of all bits and pieces that work together, if their value, their sort of contribution is also expressed in those tokens, they get rewarded for their contribution, then you can build huge infrastructures. You can make a lot of global impact by engaging communities into sort of into contributing into around this idea. This has happened in computer games. People have gathered in large communities to win the games. This has happened in Bitcoin, in the real world. We have the system because the community was there, and the idea that was central to Bitcoin was freedom of exchange, freedom of capital, freedom and ease of capital movement. Now you can tokenize the function, and then you can have around that a huge number of people that can contribute in building this. So tokenization is a new way, completely new way, to create stakeholders for projects. Now, who are the stakeholders? Are either ones who have interest in your projects or those who can influence your projects. In this respect, your shareholders are stakeholders, your customers, the state, the stakeholder. You have many stakeholders in your employees, definitely. And with each of the stakeholders, you only talk about issues that you think are related to them. So with shareholders, you talk about shareholders' corporate governance. With customers, you talk about products. With employees, you talk within their narrow or wide job descriptions. Now, owning tokens is another way to make stakeholder interested, heard, and another way of actually engaging full capacity of human intellect and ability into your project. Because he's no longer a shareholder, he's also a customer, he's also an investor, because you have heard this term token launches or coin offerings where people are crowd selling tokens, communities are crowd selling tokens to engage, to enlarge the community and raise capital to for the cause. So the token holder is the new entity transforming how things are done, how big things are done. Any token holder is by definition a client. Any token holder in many cases is a funder. Most of the token holders are usually intellectually contributing to some projects are not even structured in a legal way. In terms like big corporations are structured, they are just, the people are rewarded because they have some tokens, they work in order to make those tokens go up in price. If they go up in price, they get the reward. Or they own the tokens with which they can be accessing that function that will be there for them. And for that function to be there, they're contributing their intellectual powers. And the dialogue you can have with those people is much wider. You don't squeeze them into certain roles, which is very important for innovation, because you never know where the idea will come. You never know where the will come from. You never know where who will be able to contribute how to your project. So you want to have that engagement as wide as possible. So with this idea, let's just jump into Q&A. Wow.
You were the first. So I wanted to ask.
Hold on a second, microphones.
I wanted to look back to your pictures of 100 years old, where so it is just I wanted to address them, and there we imagined what the encirclement of the person, how will it change. But I think that now we should also with this development of blockchain, and I feel like this sounds like groundbreaking technology, and I wanted to ask, what is your vision in, for example, 20 years, vision of the person, of a human in this blockchain structure and other stuff? Because I think it is important, to listen to opinions on this sort of question.
Well, we are elbows deep in developing what is called blockchain Aero. That's the community, but also the business consortium gathered around the idea of tokenizing the Internet of Things, the infrastructure that will deliver a minute of flight to you. So 1 McFly token is 1 minute of flight. And all the infrastructure elements, including the flying cars, will be rewarded by operating in that infrastructure according to the load of the system. And all the contributors, somebody who has their loads or their parking places, or the city that allows the flights to certain numbers, or the dispatch unit that organizes the flights, or somebody who builds a mobile app so that it's convenient to monitor the load and plan your trips. All of these people will have their own entrepreneurial reward within the system, and since there will be no central body who will sort of take a cap or take a margin on all the transactions, it will be in the set. So there will be more money available for that contribution, and at the same time the function will cost much less to us. How I see in wider, this is something where our thought process is very intense. And the community, I would actually like to direct some of the questions to Nick that you will be asking, especially related to the community building and sort of this effort. But we do share the conviction that there will be less and less centralized parties that will centrally coordinate delivery of useful projects and useful products to us. We think that there will be more and more, and there are hundreds of projects on blockchain. You name it, real estate, okay, you name it, like I said, blockchain-based inventory management for any kinds of companies, blockchain-based networks of coordinating delivery systems, and blockchain-based social networks where you get rewarded for if you've posted a good stuff compared to if you've posted bad stuff. Microtransaction, micro-lending blockchains where you can easily sort of present yourself, have your credit history available for everyone, and people will contribute you their spare money just for you to make the purchase, and you will reward them back off your income because it's done automatically. Even blockchains automation for paying your taxes, because if you have your income like that in a wallet, it's on blockchain, everybody sees your wallet, not you, but your wallet on the blockchain. It's easy to take off taxes off that. This is your income, the taxes go there, everything is automatically, you don't need this huge nice tax office on Pulsar to manage the whole stuff, and then there may be less taxes you have to pay, right? So the idea is, I guess the grand idea, is that people will themselves become start-upsters in a way, and contribute their mental power, their physical assets to building things that they need and get reward. And we will have more things cheaper, we will need to own less, and we will have access to more. And one of the grand ideas also about the blockchain era and the flying cars is that imagine the property prices. The prices of flats are driven by proximity to certain things that you need in life. Maybe it's proximity to your work, maybe it's proximity to theaters and libraries, maybe it's proximity to your kindergarten where the kids are going. But it's driven by proximity. And proximity as a function of it's a limitation. It's driven by proximity, but it's actually driven by limitation of our ability to travel. Imagine you can go to Istra, to these nice places, in less than 10 minutes. What will happen to the property price in Moscow if you just have that functionality? How much living space we will actually have? Even if we continue to gather into offices, which is another topic, we may choose to use virtual reality for that, which is another trend, by the way, which we never spoke. But yeah, consider the societal change when people actually understand that they don't need any manager to set tasks for them. They can themselves identify their tasks and contribute and work and get reward and try and fail and then try again and get rewarded, etc., etc. It's like freedom of mind also, freedom of goal setting. Does that answer your question? I've seen that the next... Oh, there, okay.
Sorry, but I am not a data scientist, I am not an economist, but I have two questions. So the first question is how to prove common people that this very system, blockchain, is needed. And the second question is what would happen if suddenly the energy that maintains this system would come to an end? So you noticed that this system consumes a lot of energy.
Right. So how to prove that blockchain is really needed by people? Is that the first one?
For everybody.
For everybody?
Yes.
Well, I think that, well, Elon Musk has once said, invention of internet is compared to an organism developing a neurals network. So there were multicellular organisms before. Cells were communicating by sending small chemical agents between the cells. And then the neural network appeared, and that allowed a more complex behavior of those multicellular organisms, which you and me are. Invention of HTTP protocol enabled the internet, really. It's the protocol. Now, how can you validate that HTTP protocol is needed by everyone? Well, My mother doesn't need HTTP protocol so much because she really needs WhatsApp and Viber, and those don't use HTTP protocol. But blockchain, if you ask me, is yet another protocol. It's not a product in itself. It's not a disruptive technology, if you want the terms. It's evolutionizing technology. It's supporting technology. It changes ways of things are done in so many industries, but it doesn't eliminate any processes or any industries compared to maybe some other technologies. So how do I validate? Well, you can already validate by so many people using it already, and so many uses of it, and so many supporters of it, and so much enthusiasm about that being the new way we should do things. Now, what happens if electricity goes down? Well, that's of course a theoretical scenario that may happen, but there are other on other consensus mechanisms there, not only proof of work. So I don't think that in the blockchain we will be growing the energy consumption. Most of the contemporary blockchains are not using the computing power to have a stake in the system. They are using the, if you like, the financial part. The more tokens you have, the more influence you have in the system. The more sort of you support the system, you sign those blocks. So that requires much less energy. But what happens if, generally speaking, what happens in Moscow if electricity suddenly breaks for 2 days? I don't know. I think those crisis scenarios are, of course, elaborated by the ministry. There is a ministry for it, but I assume it won't be a pleasant time without electricity, if that's the question.
So I want to know whether could be this system immortal? Dependent in everything.
Immortal in terms of surviving us, it can be, yes. I think it's physical, so if we suddenly all die from some strange disease, the computers go on for some time and they continue to maintain the system. That is a possible scenario, I think. Anyway.
All right. So my name is Arad again. You mentioned the ministry, actually, that's the point of my speaking. As I heard you, as I get you, the thing that Bitcoins offered us is a super democracy.
There is a project there is an app for it, like Steve Jobs used to say, and the app is called Tezos. This is a special blockchain for voting, decentralized voting. Yes, there is an app for it.
So that means the thing that you mentioned, the more you earn the tokens, the more you contribute, the more you get. So I hope I'm not ruining the party, but the question was, what about controlling it? I mean, how do you control if the person whose wallet we know, but we don't know who he is, what he buys, what if it's illegal, and what about that? That's maybe the jurisdiction question, but I think it's important.
Well, that's a very good question. I think there are actually several questions, but when you ask how do we control I would first always ask why do you think we need to control? But consider cash. If you go out and buy something with, we had no problems with cash for thousands of years, right? You go out and buy something with cash. Who controlled you on that?
I go buy cash, so my personal body goes and buys, for example, drugs, and I can be caught on that.
Certainly, but then your personal body will go there and collect whatever you've bought with bitcoins anyway. I mean, it's just part of the transaction. Another part is the delivery. Another part is you're using it. Another part is consequences of you using it. So all these other parts have effect on the world. What you are saying is that what if you do a damaging thing to the world? Or what happens if you do the damaging thing to the other members of society? And there are other ways to control that beyond limiting your ability to pay for stuff we don't want you to have, right?
Let's see, we got a methods of control to about the cash. I mean, we have the government, but what about the bitcoins? Are there any methods of control?
Well, again, maybe it's even better because cash transactions are not recorded. Bitcoin transactions are actually recorded. And there have been cases of seizing and arresting illegal markets that were operating on purely Bitcoins. You would be surprised, but maybe it's actually easier for governments to, and for law enforcement people to actually trace everything that you've done once you're identified. While with cash, you don't trace exchange of cash at all. So even if you are caught with the last transaction, you can't be traced back. With Bitcoin, in some cases you can. So they can trace you back and actually see everything you've done. And that's actually, what you're saying is a threat, I would say it's also an opportunity there. But again, what you want to limit is not people transacting. I mean, transacting money is a lame, a lousy way. Limiting your ability to transact money is a lousy way to limit your ability to conduct crime. Crime is not when you exchange monies. Crime is when you take that gun that you've bought and go shooting people. That's not a thing. You have to. This is the lousiness, the lameness of the law enforcement sometimes. They try to limit you somewhere else. But what they need to be doing is limit you exactly when you are trying to commit a crime. And just transacting monies is not a crime. Crime is to own certain things in some countries. Crime is to use certain things in some countries. Crime is to sort of affect other people. So go limit there.
Thanks, I hope I get it. One more little question. It might be specific. I just Googled it that Bitcoin account can be blocked. The only person that can block your account is you.
There are a number of people who have blocked their accounts by losing their passwords. So, Destiny or Fatum can block your account. But okay, a coincidence can block your account. Memory loss can block your account. But that's right, you can't block account.
There is no project, there is no program that can block your account.
Well, if you have a wallet full of $100 notes, is there anybody who can block your wallet?
No, somebody can steal it.
Well, that's also happened on blockchain. It is possible to steal your wallet, so why not? Physically, from you. If you have your wallet on your mobile phone, somebody can take your mobile phone, they have taken your wallet.
Alright, thanks.
But the good news is that if you remember your private key, you may be the first one to run to the computer network and reactivate your wallet on another device and change your private key, and then they have no access to your money. So it's actually better than wallet, because you still have some chance.
Okay, you can continue the topic about limited. Who limit the money in blockchain? I mean, government print money for us and can control it for inflation and other. And in blockchain, who can control the, I don't know, all money in this system? And if it's government, so how they, I don't know, should we do they do conversation between each other?
That's a good question. The idea with particular Bitcoin blockchain is that nobody controls it. It's the mathematical algorithm and the ever-rising complexity of the mathematical task that needs to be solved to mine more money controls the money. At the same time, what you really, you shouldn't care about how many bitcoins are there. But what you should care, because they are almost infinitely divisible. I mean, we can trade in fractions of bitcoins, so it's not a problem. The problem is to match the value of cash you have in circulation in the economy, the value of money that you have in circulation, to match that with the value of valuable stuff to buy with that money. Now, if the amount of valuable stuff goes down, like production is destroyed, like in the 90s in the Soviet Union, but the money is still there, you have a lot of money, little stuff to buy, the money becomes worthless. You may have another scenario where you have a lot of valuable stuff in the economic system to buy with fixed amount of money, and then you have a deflate. I mean, the money suddenly rises in price because it has to match the buying power, and there is more stuff to buy. That's what destroyed the golden standard, where, remember, we all remember that once upon a time, all the currencies were backed with the holdings of gold. The problem was that the world managed to develop valuable stuff at a much higher pace than the world was able to dig gold off the ground, so the things didn't match. So there was less and less gold available to buy the value of this stuff, and then suddenly we decided, okay, let's scrap the gold, I mean, let's just send out paper. So, issue paper. And those economists in the Federal Reserve System, they are and the International Monetary Fund, they're not just printing money because they want. What they want is they want to have precisely the speed of circulation of money times the volume of money gives you the total sort of money available in the system. And that has to match roughly the pace at which the valuable stuff in the system grows or falls in availability. And to manage this is required that centralized system with all the economists and guys like myself who had their degree in economics. We are made to do that, and only that. That's macroeconomics. But in blockchain, you don't need that. You don't need that function. That function is gone. Because what you have is, you have those valuable stuffs, and you have those bitcoins, and they are there. Bitcoins are rising in value because there are more and more stuffs you can buy with Bitcoin. We have experienced like double rise, doubling the price of Bitcoins in the last, I think, quarter. Because of the publicity, because there are more and more stuff you can buy with Bitcoins. But the thing is that for you and me, it actually doesn't matter. Because what matters is that we can always have a fraction of Bitcoin to buy more and more stuff there. There will be more and more. So it only matters for those who have mined Bitcoins a long time ago. Now they're multimillionaires. But okay, so be it. Some people suddenly became rich. They could have found the treasure that a pirate has left somewhere. We don't have to measure this, take this into account. For the economic system, what makes sense is that you have those tokens in circulation, and nobody prints them, and you have more and more stuff available, and it does not impose any inflation or deflation effect on the currency. I mean, for us, for the users, it does ultimately because of but with another type. But that's exactly what I wanted. I'm sorry, I'm taking this too long, but in a system where you have tokenized function, you will not have even that. Because Bitcoin is an intermediary. We still consider that these coins on blockchain have to be this universal payment tool, which Bitcoin is. Then it's just money. But imagine a world where we do not need money at all. Because money is essentially a centralized function helping us to understand the value of different things in the system. We cannot understand how many potatoes do I have to exchange for those eggs, and how many of those together I need to exchange for 1 minute of flight. Because it's complicated. There are so many things with different values. And then money is just a term of expression, and it's easy to transact in money, it's easy to keep the money, you can save money, a lot of things around money. Not needed anymore. Just not needed, because you can express the flight or a function in a token, like in flight token, we express 1 minute of flight, technically. And then that's the value on its own. And then you can exchange, maybe that will be the central value. What will be the central value if you don't need money? Will it be the kilowatt of energy? Maybe we will express other things in energy units. Or maybe we will express everything else in flight units, because flight is freedom, it's more fundamental than just energy. Maybe we will express, maybe there will be some blockchain for creativity. Creativity may be tokenized. Maybe we will express value of coffee in Starbucks in creativity units, because we don't need rubles or dollars for that. Yeah, that's the idea behind that. So
let's try to say something here. Ilya, thanks much. We see that you are very excited about blockchain, and we know that you are a bigger expert than we are. So please help us with one question that should steer the discussion the other way. So, we know for a fact that people exist in the world who don't like blockchain. For example, there is an official press release of Kaspersky that came out 1 month ago. There is another press release of Apple, where people with a lot of experience explain point by point why blockchain is bad. Again, you know these people better than we do. So, let us ask you to play the game. Imagine that you are given something very valuable to explain now very quickly why blockchain is bad. What kind of argument would you bring based on all this arguments that you observe in the market? Thank you.
That's a very good question, but please don't which particular blockchain? I think there are about 10 or 20 different blockchains out there.
Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Bitcoin and Ethereum. Yes. Okay, very well. So Bitcoin blockchain and Ethereum blockchain, they both have inefficiencies in their technology. They have their limits. The limits, just a little disclaimer. Those limits are very well recognized. You don't need Kaspersky to outline those limits. Those guys who made Bitcoin, they know or Ethereum, they know their limits, and actually they talk about those limits every day. And everything is in YouTube. I mean, it's a community effort. So the limit of blockchain that has been recognized, and that's why you may have heard in August the fork has been, and now we have Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core. The limit was recognized that people are using Bitcoins for so many things for which the designers of Bitcoin didn't think they will be using those Bitcoin blockchain. They're using blockchain, the technology, for so many other things than just transacting coins, that the technology is not able to scale fast enough to serve that ever-increasing need. That's why Bitcoin Cash appeared, for those who need faster transactions, those who need more data embedded into any transaction, and there will be developments more and more. So Ethereum, the core and fundamental problem with Ethereum, as far as I understand it, is that when people increase intensity of using Ethereum blockchain, it's not so much that it stalls like Bitcoin blockchain, but it grows in size. So for example, if you have a real hardcore blockchain wallet, you download all the blockchain to your computer and it's suddenly 160 gigabytes of data. This is the blockchain. So for Ethereum, but then it grows linearly. But for Ethereum, the more people use it, the more code is there, the more the virtual machine spread around the holders of Ethereum processes that code, the amount of data grows exponentially. And that is exactly the problem that actually now I think in September it's either already happened or is about to happen. There will be an update to Ethereum blockchain, so that particular problem will be tackled. But there will be many other problems later on. And if you ask me, I think that Ethereum blockchain and Bitcoin blockchain are just two blockchains that are candidates to survive in future. They may not survive. But blockchain as a concept, that's why I centered around the usability of the technology, different applications, and changes it may bring to how we sort of interact with technology and with our own peers, is because the concept is still there. There will be different ways, like computing power, it grows all the time. The limits are recognized all the time. The new applications put more stresses on the technology than developers sort of react, so it's a constant process. But thank you for the question. Yes, it's important to understand that, because somebody was asking, oh, how could we avoid making mistakes? So one could say, okay, Vitalik Buterin made a mistake coding Ethereum like that. Okay, it was maybe not so much a mistake, but he coded it in certain circumstances, and the environment changes so fast that in the new circumstances, it has to be changed. It's not a mistake. So if you reframe mistakes to actually decisions you make decisions with a full sort of availability of information and your computational power in your head and distributed computational power in the heads of your peers and communities and stakeholders and project team members, you make decisions. These are never mistakes. If future shows it doesn't work, you just make new decisions. I guess that's the way it is.
Great, guys. Time flies when you're having fun. I think I would propose that we finish the lecture part and switch it into like one-to-one conversations. Of course, there is no such thing as one-to-one conversation when there is only one lecture and there are 250 of you. But we need to move ahead. So let's thank the speaker. It is 20